Good evening, my 4 subscribers. This is Emerald Green Eye, and today I'm going to be doing a slightly different video. Instead of doing an alternate history electoral map, I'm actually going to do a modern electoral map where President Trump is going to be facing off against a generic Democrat. Not a single one of the candidates that are running, just a generic Democrat that encompasses the current ideals of the party. So let's get right into it since I am on a time limit. I believe President or I believe President Trump will not win any of the West Coast states. They've become safely Democratic. The last time they were competitive was '04. However, if Howard Schultz, not Charles Schultz, that was the Peanuts creator, but if Howard Schultz runs as an independent, I see President Trump making plays for Oregon or Washington. Alaska, that's going to go to him safely, despite the fact that I think the Democrats are going to try and make plays for it in future elections, not this one. But oops, that's not what I meant to do. Idaho will never go blue in my lifetime. Um, President Trump will win the Mountain West safe margin. Nebraska second, that's likely simply due to the fact that I can't really see any Democrats who would seriously have a chance at winning Nebraska second, which is basically Omaha. He'd win Kansas, Oklahoma. He'd win these deeper southern states. He'd win coal country. He'd win South Carolina. He'd win Alabama. He'd win Mississippi. Although I believe that in future elections, Mississippi will become closer. Uh, President Trump, unless again there's an independent candidate, would win Utah again by a safe margin. President Trump would win Indiana by a safe margin, especially with Mike Pence on the ticket. Indiana's only gone blue once since 1964, and that was in 2008. That was during a recession. So, yeah, I see Texas being likely for President Trump simply due to the fact that a bunch of people are moving to Texas, especially a lot of Californians, a lot of Democratic Californians. And the reason I'm putting Texas in the likely column was the fact that even though it was very close in the midterms, even though it's been trending blue, I believe that it will go to him by a likely margin because it went for him immediately off the bat in 2016 after poll closings. So definitely, I think President Trump has an appeal in Texas. Missouri, I see that being safe for him. It's been trending red. Iowa, I see that being likely for him. It went for him in 2016 by better margins than Texas did. So that's why I'm putting it in the likely column. I see the Democrats carrying New Mexico by a likely column. Same thing with Colorado because the whole education issues, and New Mexico has become safer for the Democrats as they get a more influx of Democratic Hispanic voters. I'm not saying that all Hispanics vote Democrat. I'm just saying that New Mexico has become, especially in Santa Fe, Albuquerque, has become a safe place for these Democratic Hispanics to thrive. And that's why I'm saying that the Democrats are going to take New Mexico. Um, and Colorado, I don't see it going for President Trump unless he passes legalization of weed or unless he makes reforms to the education system. Colorado is definitely a very educated state, cares a lot about the education of the country. Arizona, I'm seeing that going for President Trump by a lean margin, like as it gets all this influx of new voters from the South, Mexico, those immigrant voters, and then from California, those Democratic voters. I've been to Arizona quite a bit, and from what I see, President Trump will most likely be the last Republican to win Arizona for a while. That's just how it is. I'm going to come back to Nevada. I see Illinois going Democrats safe. Chicago, although I can see Republicans making plays for it in the future, probably the 2040s. Um, President Trump, Georgia will lean into his column. It's definitely been trending Democratic, especially in the midterms. That was very close. However, in its heart, it's still a Republican state, so that would go for him. Florida would also lean for him because incumbency advantage. Florida has never not gone for a Republican, or for never not gone for an incumbent since 1980 when Ronald Reagan won it. Um, And no matter who you play, Florida is always going to be lean due to the demographics. I believe President Trump will win North Carolina by a likely margin simply due to his Southern appeal. And his appeal in the natural resource industry, those miners, those other workers, coal, everything, they would come out for President Trump. They did in 2016. Democrats, DC, Maryland, if they nominate Joe Biden, then Delaware would be safe, although President Trump did win 2 counties. So I'm seeing Delaware as being likely. I'm seeing New Jersey as being likely because of President Trump's appeal to the Rust Belt. The Democrats would take New York safe because of the city. I'm seeing Massachusetts, Vermont, 2 of the most liberal states in the union, would be safe for Democrats. Maine first, still pretty liberal. That would go safe for the Democrats. Virginia, that would, I'm saying, lean to the Democrats because it seems that the Democrats are taking Virginia for granted this election cycle. I see Trump as making plays for it, and depending on who the candidate is, I believe he could win Virginia. However, due to the DC suburbs and the stigma around the president, I'm not sure that Virginia could flip into his column. And if something else happens, then I could see Virginia flipping. Again, it all depends on who the Democrats nominate. I see Donald Trump winning Ohio by a likely margin because all the pollsters, all the people who I've seen predicting elections, not just YouTubers, but legitimate news sources, they have President Trump as winning Ohio again. His approval is doing very well in Ohio. I see President Trump winning Wisconsin by a lean margin, even though the Democrats are having their debates there. I see him taking that again, especially as the Democrats become more environmentalist and slowly leave the industrial Rust Belt workers behind. So that's why I'm saying he would probably win Pennsylvania again by a tilt margin, meaning he gets reelected. Yes, I believe the president will become reelected. I see the generic Dem carrying Connecticut safe. I see them carrying Rhode Island by a likely margin. I say that because Rhode Island is actually trending red. You can look at all the data. Rhode Island is trending red. It's probably the #1 New England state besides Maine or New Hampshire to flip in the next few election cycles. Speaking of Maine, President Trump will win his 2nd district by a likely margin, but the Democrats would win Maine at large by a lean margin. I say that because Maine is still at its heart a mostly liberal state. However, it's slowly trending back to the Republicans. So I see President Trump carrying that 2nd district again. I see President Trump as flipping New Hampshire by a tilt margin because that was his closest state in 2016, and presidents usually win what was their closest state upon their reelection unless you do very poorly. And yeah, so and unless you're Obama, who didn't win Missouri his 2nd time. Obama was the first president since Woodrow Wilson to be elected by a smaller margin than he was first elected by. But anyway, going back to the Rust Belt again, I see the Democrats making serious plays for Michigan out of all these states except maybe Minnesota. However, I think it would go to President Trump again by a tilt margin, and that's due to his appeal to the Rust Belt. He's bringing the jobs back. That's what I'm saying. He's bringing the jobs back. He's appealing to the industrial worker who voted Democrat for a very long time. But as the Democrats slowly leave those factory workers behind in favor for appealing to the Hispanic voters, to the very left-leaning voters, then I see the Rust Belt going red again. And this is why I also see him picking up Minnesota. Again, this all depends on who the Democrats nominate as their final candidate. It's just a generic Democratic candidate. But Minnesota, I see flipping to President Trump, especially with the improving economy. And see, I told you I was under a time limit. Luckily, we only have 1 state left, and that's Nevada. And I believe that a generic Democrat, depending on who they are, could win Nevada by a tilt margin, simply due to the fact that I don't see Trump. Actually, no, F that. I'm going to see President Trump as winning Nevada by a tilt because I see him appealing to Reno and Las Vegas like he did in 2016.